Welcome to Spenelli Speaks. I'm Danny, and if you are new here, make sure you hit that subscribe button because you don't want to miss out on the videos that I have coming your way. Now, if you are not new here, you know that I have been doing some videos on reorganizing my bookshelves. So this is going to be part 5 of that series, where I am now moved into a different room where I am showing off my bookshelves. So right now I'm actually in my bedroom with a bookshelf that is right outside of my bed, and these books here are typically the books that I liked a little bit more, or maybe that I am looking to read more closely to now, which might not actually be the case after all, because now that I'm looking at all these, I'm like, I wonder why. So these are books that I specifically brought into my room for this bookshelf to have close to me. I don't know that I'll do it the same way I did my other shelves, where I did each shelf as a different video. I think we may be able to get through this entire bookshelf in one video. We'll see how long that takes. I'll try to go as quickly as I can because I know that these videos do get quite long. So we're going to go from bottom to top like we did before, and I'm just going to pull these books out as we go. So right away on the bottom shelf here, I have a ton of books that aren't really even mine. So my fiance does like to read a little bit here and there. So he has this R.A. Salvatore, which this one is The Lone Drow. It's the Hunter's Blades trilogy. This is book 2. These are fantasy novels. There's witches, wizards, elves, I think. Maybe not witches and wizards, but definitely elves. I don't know much about these books. I don't actually read them, but that's one that he has here. He also has another one. This one is The Crystal Shard by the same author. Looks like this is, and the same one there, The Forgotten Realms, The Legend of Dr. Izzet book, it looks like. I don't know, this one looks like it's book 4, so out of there. And then we also have this other one, again, R.A. Salvatore, this one, The Legend of Drizzt Collector's Edition, book 4. So, lots of R.A. Salvatore, so we have those. And then we have that Cash Crash Jubilee. If you remember from Christmas time, I had a book that I wanted to get for him, which was the second in this series, which was The Naked Truth. Totally miffed it, guys. He already had it, and I had no idea. So I actually bought him a book he already had, so we'll be taking that one back and seeing if we can get another one. But there is a third one in there, so we'll probably just save our time or wait for that book to come out. So he has that. So all 4 of those books aren't actually mine, so we can take them off the shelf. Then we have this book, Neil Stephenson's Quicksilver, and this is volume 1 of the Baroque Cycle. This book I bought a while back at Barnes & Noble, when I say a while back, I mean like maybe even 10 years ago. It looked really interesting. I think at the time I was like, wow, that's a really chunky book. I want to read that because it's big. And I have probably, so I have a postcard in here. Oh, look at Audrey Hepburn. Not very far in, very few pages read. Looks like up to page 6 I made it. And it was not keeping my attention. Now being a little bit older, a little bit more mature, I might take another crack at it. This one, it says, Quicksilver is a story of Daniel Waterhouse, fearless thinker and conflicted Puritan, pursuing knowledge in the company of the greatest minds of Baroque-era Europe, in a chaotic world where reason wars with the bloody ambitions of the mighty, and where catastrophic, natural or otherwise, where catastrophe, natural or otherwise, can alter the political landscape overnight. It is a chronicle of the breathtaking exploits of the half-cocked Jack Stafftoe, a London street urchin turned swashbuckling adventurer and legendary king of the vagabonds, risking life and limb for fortune and love while slowly maddening from the pox. So, looks like an era book. These words are super tiny, guys. This looks like a hefty heifer of a book. So that's definitely going to have to go onto a TBR, so we'll put that in that kind of pile. Then I have The Mermaid Chair, which I picked this one up at a rummage sale. They were selling books for really cheap. And I thought I had heard about this from a different something online or whatnot. So I thought I would give it a go. It's from the same author of The Secret Life of Bees, so it's probably a good one. So that'll go in the TBR pile. This I pulled off of here as well, but this one is Gillian Flynn's Dark Places, and this book I actually picked up through Garage Sale. I don't know if anyone has that app, but it's basically people will put their stuff online through this app, and then you're able to say, yep, I want to get that, and then you go to the person's house and pick it up. This was part of that. I got it for $0.25. Okay, so here's the story. A town not so far away from me is where I had to pick this up. And what I was supposed to do is I was supposed to go to the front door, and there was going to be a small cooler that had the book in it, and I was supposed to leave my quarter in that cooler. Now, who sells a book for $0.25 on an online thing? I don't know. But anywho, I get there, no book in the cooler. So now I have to knock on the door, because I can see there's people in there, and they're playing video games, and I'm like, okay, this is really weird. So I knock on the door, and about 6 dogs go mental, like barking, yippity yippity yip. They're all little ankle biters. And I'm like, oh shit. Like, I don't want to be here anymore. And this weird guy with no shirt on answers the door, but like cracks it this much, and he's like, what do you want? And I said, I'm here to pick up a book. Like, through Garage Sale, I was told to come here at 6 o'clock is when I was going to be here. It was supposed to be in the cooler. And he's like, oh. And then he shuts the door, and then he starts yelling at this girl, who starts yelling back and like, ah, like, you know, you were supposed to do this and yada, yada, yada. And so, needless to say, he opens the door back up, hands me the book. I give him the $0.25, and he's like, thanks, bye. And then I get in my car, and I'm like, oh my gosh, that was so weird. I can't believe it. And then you can praise each other on this Garage Sale app. They go on there and give me a good remark, like, oh, she was here on time, didn't mind that we had missed the drop thing. And I'm like, okay, super weird people, but whatever. I got my book for $0.25. Well, then I look at it later, and it's like from a library. So I'm like, oh my gosh, did they steal this from a library? Like, it's a legit library book. That's crazy. So I don't know. They might have bought it in like a library sale or something, and I'm just going to hope that that's what happened. The next book I have, Water for Elephants. Oh, and by the way, I read this. So just so you know, this is going in a red pile. So Dark Places by Gillian Flynn. Super, super dark, guys. It's about a murder that happens, and then like 15 years later, some stuff comes up where that it's becoming solved, and the stuff you find out about what happened, and it's like the weirdest frickin' book ever. It's super, super crazy. And if you know anything about Gillian Flynn, she has that book, Gone Girl, Sharp Objects, and I think another one too, and all of her stuff is very, it's insane. So I'm sorry I just like totally went over that, but that's in a red pile. So I did read that. I read that for my book club. I have Water for Elephants. Have not yet read this. I got this for $0.25 at a like a dog shelter. They were raising money, and they had all books for $0.25. So I got Water for Elephants. I've heard good things about that, so that isn't going into a to be read pile. Then I have Kite Runner, same thing, same sale, same $0.25. So I want to read this one as well. So that'll be in a red pile. So what I'm planning to do is to take all the stuff that's in here and bring it into that other room where I'm going to be putting more of the shelves, so that all of these books can all be in the same room. I have Lucky Man by Michael J. Fox. I love Michael J. Fox. He's one of my favorite people. I think he is inspirational, and this book, I'm about halfway through. I come back to it every once in a while, but is kind of him exploring, learning that he has Parkinson's, how that kind of affected his life, his relationships, and just altogether how he's kind of exploring that. So that's the first. So I'm about halfway through that, so that'll stay in my to-be reading pile, I guess. And then additionally, I found this one at a rummage sale, and I got it for $1. It's Always Looking Up, The Adventures of an Incurable Optimist. So this is a second nonfiction that he's put together. So the first one's a memoir, and then this one here again. So I wanted to get to read that one. So that's in a to-be read pile. Brokeback Mountain. So adore this novella, and this is actually the short story, and the screenplay is in the back as well, so you get to see how it was converted. Really love this novella. I read it for a class, and then another class, wrote some papers on it, also saw the movie, really enjoyed the movie. It's not for everyone, but it's truly one of the most amazing love stories I've ever read. So I really liked that one. So that's in the red pile. I have here, and these books are super dusty. I'm super grossed out by the fact that this is so dusty in here. But Imagine Me Gone, we read this in my book club as well. It's about a family who has kind of a genetic disposition for mental illness, and it goes through that, how the children deal with their father's passing from suicide. He had mental illness issues, and then also then one of their brothers. So there's 3 children, 2 boys and a girl, and one of the boys is also suffering from mental illness. So they're kind of going through the stages of that. I wasn't a big fan of this book. I didn't really enjoy the writing style. It was at sometimes confusing, and to be quite honest, I really didn't like the topic. Not to say that it's not a good topic, I just didn't like the way it was being presented. I only really liked one of the characters, which a good book, you don't necessarily have to like any of the characters, but for me, it wasn't my cup of tea, so I didn't really enjoy that one, but I did read that for a book club. And then the last book that's in here, which is so dusty, oh my god, this is so bad, but Anne Hood, The Book That Matters Most. This was actually the very first book that my book club that we started about 3 years ago. We're in our third year. This was the very first book that we read. It's very good. It follows a woman who is just recently going through a divorce, and kind of about how her childhood has affected her adulthood. And then it also follows her adult daughter, who is in Europe, and following her and the things that she's doing and how they are interwoven. A lot of different things happen in this book. It's very interesting. I think it's very well written. Our book club then additionally read Anne Hood's A Knitting Circle, and again, that one was very good as well. So we really did enjoy these books. So that's, again, in the red pile. So that's that first shelf. So we got everything off of there. So there wasn't much there. On this middle shelf here, we have Dan Brown's Deception Point. I loved this book. This is so good. It, every time you turn the page, something happens where you're just like, that's insane. What could possibly happen next? And then it switches to a different character's point of view. So you're like, damn it. You want to know, they're literally off of a cliff, and then it switches to someone else's point of view, so you don't know what's going to happen, and you're always on the edge of your seat. I mean, I probably took very little time to read this, and then additionally, my fiance was looking for a good book to read, and I recommended this, and he also liked it. So very, very good. I love Dan Brown. I've read all of the Robert Langdon books, and realistically, I think I've read all of Dan Brown's books. I love them. They're so good. I love the suspense. I love the thriller. I love that they're not super gory. They're just really well written. And yes, they're all very similar. They follow the same style, but I mean, if you got a good thing going, don't lose it. So I really do like that. So that's Deception Point. So that's in the red pile. I had gotten this book some time ago from my mom. It's called The Burglar Who Liked to Quote Kipling. I'm not too far in. I haven't really taken too much time to read it. I've never heard of it before. It's a mystery, but probably get back to that at some point. I've always kept it in my room thinking that I'll get back to it, but I haven't quite been able to. I've found other books that I would prefer to read, but at some point I would like to get back to this. I do have a nice little bookmark in there, so that'll go in my to be read pile. So this book I read for a class. It's called Jesus' Son, and it's stories by Dennis Johnson. So these are all short stories, but it follows all of the same character. And it is a character who is kind of struggling with addiction, and you follow him through his kind of different parts of his life up until he finds rehab. And let me tell you, it's so good. And they actually made a movie based on these stories with Billy Crudup as the main character, and Jack Black is in it, and Dennis Leary's in it, and it's so good. Like, the movie to me, I think, stands alone as its own kind of thing. It's similar. It does take parts of these stories and has him follow along, and there are some really cringeworthy moments, and there are some good fun moments, but altogether I feel like the short stories themselves are way better. Of course, I've said that time and time again, but that's a very good compilation of short stories. I would highly recommend those. I'm just going to go from this way to this way. Gone Baby Gone. I had to read this for a class. Holy deepness. This book, they made it into a movie with, I think his name is, so it's Casey Affleck. So Casey Affleck, who is Ben Affleck's brother, he's the main character in this, and it's about a private detective who is helping the police with a lost child, so a child that is being supposed to have been kidnapped, and the intricacies of what is actually happening. If you have a light stomach when it comes to child abduction, child violence, don't read this. There were parts of the book that I had a really hard time getting through because of the violence towards children, and it was too appalling to me. So if you have a light stomach for that kind of stuff, I do not recommend this book for you. Beside that, it was a very good book, very well put together. The storyline altogether was unique to me, at least, and very interesting, and it kept you guessing, and I myself had a hard time predicting what was happening in the book. So that was very good. So that's a red pile. So these next two books are from the same author, and they follow the same kind of backstory-ish. So first is The Dante Club. This is by Matthew Pearl, and then the next one is The Poe Shadow, again by Matthew Pearl. They're not like... It's not like this is the sequel. It's just that he's written books that are similar to one another. And when I say similar, I mean that he's going off of old literary or writers. I really want to read these books, and I got them specifically to read them. And to me, and I can see I haven't got too far, it's just too intense. Like, it's so much... it's setting up the scene and trying to have you understand why this story has a connection to the Dante, Dante's Divine Comedy. And then I haven't even gotten to this one yet. So I always keep them in my room because I intend to read them. And then I just, when I can't get into a book, I have to pause on it. And I am not a DNFer, so that's my biggest thing, is I have a hard time DNFing books. So I don't do that often enough. So that's why I still have these. They'll go into my to be read pile. Here we have a book that I had to read for a class, for women's lit class, and this is The Sweet Breathing of Plants. I can tell you I didn't read it then. I don't plan on reading it now, so before I even get into explaining what it's about, I'm just going to put it in an unhaul pile because I'm sick of holding on to it, and quite honestly, I'm not interested. So Unhaul. If you've read it and you're like, Danny, you need to read that, then please comment below, but realistically, I don't want to read it. So here we have Empire Falls by Richard Russo. This is a really good book. It follows a town and kind of the people in the town, and I can read it here. It says Miles Roby has been slinging burgers at the Empire Grill for 20 years, a job that cost him his college education and most of his self-respect. What keeps him here? It could be his bright, sensitive daughter, Tick, who needs all his help surviving the local high school. Or maybe it's Janine, Miles' soon-to-be ex-wife, who's taken up with the noxiously vain health club proprietor. Or perhaps it was the imperious Francine Whiting, who owns everything in town, and seems to believe that everything includes Miles himself. In Empire Falls, Richard Russo delves deep into the blue-collar heart of America in a work that overflows with hilarity, heartache, and grace. So even though I can't read here, obviously falling over every word, this was an interesting book. I liked it. I had to read it for a class, and I do believe that this was made into a movie. So I think it had Ed Harris in it. So that was very good. Keep that in my read pile. That one I might come back to because it had a lot of interwoven of a lot of different characters, and I do sometimes like that because you get to see how the whole town kind of works together, kind of like in that Gilmore Girl sense. Okay, so next up is The Circle by Dave Eggers, and I have not yet read this. We were going to read this in my book club last year, but we had started reading a book that was quite thick one month, and everyone was really having a hard time getting through it, so we skipped the next month to continue that book, and that month happened to be The Circle. So we didn't read that yet, but so what we did do, though, is we were going to put it for the next year. Well, in that time, I saw the movie with Tom Hanks and, what's her name from Harry Potter? Emma Watson. Yeah. And did not like it at all. Like, horrible movie. I thought the movie sucked. It was not good at all. So then I'm like, God, do I want to spend all that time reading that book? But again, the book is usually always better, so I think I'll come back to it at some point and read that because I think the premise is very interesting, so I would like to get back to that. So I'll put that on a to-be-read pile here. So Toni Morrison, Paradise. This book was very interesting. So this is Paradise opens with a horrifying scene of mass violence and chronicles its genesis in an all-black small town in rural Oklahoma. Founded by the descendants of freed slaves and survivors of the exodus from a hostile world, the patriarchal community of Ruby is built on a righteous, rigidly enforced moral law and fear. But 17 miles away, another group of exiles has gathered in a promised land of their own, and it is upon these women in a flight from death and despair that 9 male citizens of Ruby will lay their pain, their terror, and their murderous rage. I don't like that when the back of the book talks more about the author than it does about the actual book, but from what I can remember, I want to say that the 17 miles away, they end up in a nunnery or something, so they're like these men that something bad happens, they escape to this nunnery or something like that. I can't quite remember. But what I do remember is that it was really interesting because it really dives into the dynamics of this thought process of the bad thing that had happened and then how they kind of work through it, if I can remember correctly. And I wonder what this piece of paper is back here. Probably can be thrown away. Oh yeah, so here, scavenger hunt for paradise. How many women are killed in or outside the convent? Do any of the women associated with the convent hurt any of the male intruders? How many men are aiming their guns at women at the end of the chapter? Who are the 3 main characters that go to the basement? What is the race of the first victim killed, and what is the race of the last victims killed? What associations do the men who attack the convent have with the women of the convent? Where did the men get their knowledge of how to attack the convent? Does all of Ruby support this attack on the convent? So I think that gave you more information about what the book was about than the back of the book did. So all I do remember is I did really like this. I thought it was super thought-provoking. Do I remember all the details? No. Will I read it again? I don't know. But I'll keep it just in case. That's a red pile. Okay. So this book here, and I'm sorry if the light is not allowing you to see it very well, but this is Just Don't Fall by Josh Sundquist. And we actually, through my current full-time job, we saw a telecast with him and he spoke about leadership. And he's a Paralympian, I think is what they call it. He has one leg, but he does skiing. So he does I think it's downhill skiing or something. So he's an Olympian. And he talks about, how learning so cancer is what took his leg. So him learning that he had cancer, working through that as a child, how his family helped, and how he's made that, it be something that accelerates his life. So he was a really good speaker, really funny. He talks about how, he only needs one shoe and one sock, and if he could only find someone else that had the other leg, then they could swap. And so he was funny. So we ended up getting books for him while he was there. So I was able to get one of those. I would like to read that. So that'll go into to be read. You've all heard me talk about The Hours. So here's my copy of The Hours by Michael Cunningham. This is a book about 3 women in 3 different timelines. The first being Virginia Woolf, while she is writing Mrs. Dalloway, one of her most famous books. And then it follows another character, which I can't remember her name right now, who is in the 1950s, and she is suffering with postpartum depression, regular depression, I think, too, and is also reading Mrs. Dalloway. So there's the connection there. And then the very last timeline, which is supposed to be modern day, and at the time I think it's 2007, but we're following a character named Clarissa, who is also the same name as the main character in Mrs. Dalloway. And we're following her. She's planning a big party, very similar to Clarissa in Mrs. Dalloway. And she is friends with a poet who is, we find out later, way more interconnected to those three storylines than we originally would have thought. But beautiful story. I love this book. I've read it many times. I've watched the movie. I think the movie is just as powerful. It has Meryl Streep in it, as well as Nicole Kidman. Nicole Kidman won the Oscar for that. Very, very good. It's one of my favorite, I would say, in my top 5 favorite books. So that's in my red pile. We have this book here. It's called Death Comes to Pemberley by P.D. James. Anytime I find anything that is closely related to Jane Austen, I will pick it up. So seeing this, I was really excited. I don't remember where I got it. I might have got it just randomly at a bookstore. But this is something that I thought was interesting. So it says, in their 6 years of marriage, Elizabeth and Darcy have forged a peaceful, happy life for their family at Pemberley, Darcy's impressive estate. Her father is a regular visitor. Her sister Jane and her husband, Bingley, live nearby. The marriage prospects for Darcy's sister Georgina are favorable, and preparations for their annual autumn ball are proceeding apace. But on the eve of the ball, chaos descends. Lydia Wickham, Elizabeth's disgraced sister, who with her husband have been barred from the property, arrives in a hysterical state, shrieking that Wickham has been murdered. Plunged into a frightening mystery and lurid murder trial, the lives of Pemberley's owners and servants alike may never be the same. So, obviously not by Jane Austen, but definitely the same story, but something to consider. So that'll be in my to be read. Along the same lines. So again, picking up something that is not about, but closely related to. So this is How Jane Austen Conquered the World. And I actually got this at the dollar store. Our dollar stores sometimes have books in it, and so I saw this one there one day, and I was like, hell yeah, I'll get that. So this is a biography about the author and her cultural influence and whatnot. So not what I originally thought. I thought this was a fiction book. It's actually a nonfiction book. So that'll go into my to be read pile. Okay, so here is the book that if you watched, I think it was in my second, so part 2 of my Reorganizing, I was talking about that weird short story about the woman who like had intercourse with an alien man and then like wanted to be with him. So here's the book that follows that up. So it's called Mr. Spaceman, and it's a full like book of this crazy woman. And so she like gets abducted by this alien and then falls in love with this alien, and this is like the book. And it was a short story first, so now it's like a full novel. I remember I started reading this and I was laughing so hard because it was just so ridiculous. Like alien stuff to me is not like, it's so bizarre. Not to say that it's not possible that there are alien life forms out there, but not to what people make them out to be. So it's too fantastical for me. But so I had to get this. I saw it one day and I was like, oh my gosh, I have to get this book. So I did, and it's quite comical. I'm going to put that in my read pile. I have The Brooklyn Follies, which this was an advanced reader's copy, again, from that same bookstore that I did all those other reviews for. I got this. I really liked this. This was one of the first books that I really felt a pull to, as far as, you know, it being well written in a contemporary sense. I was so used to, at that time when I read this book, reading fantasy novels and books that were about witches and wizards and vampires and all that kind of thing. I had just come out of a huge time frame of which I was really reading only young adult novels. So this was at the time, again, this is about, we're in 2020, this was in 2004. It was my first real, you know, introduction to an adult book, a real book. So this is about a guy just kind of living his life and, you know, what he kind of sees in Brooklyn. And I think it's like he's like in his 50s or 60s. And I just really liked it. I thought it was really good. I really enjoyed it at the time. I think I would totally come back to it. Seeing as this is a advanced reader's copy, there's not a lot on the back about the book, but it says Nathan Glass has come to Brooklyn to die. This is only the latest in a long line of follies. So I really like this book. So if you yourself have read this, I would love to hear what you thought. I'm really thinking about rereading it. So if anyone wants to do a buddy read on this one, I would totally do that. Okay. So this video is getting quite long, so I think we're going to pause there, and then we'll come back for part 6, where we'll get the rest of this half and the rest of these shelves done. But if you're here, you're still here, rockstar status. Thank you so much for watching, and I hope you have hit that subscribe button. If you've read any of these books, I'd love to hear what your thoughts are, and if you think that any of them are worth a reread. So yeah, you know how it goes, guys. I hope you have a great day and happy reading. Bye!